Hey everybody, Dr. Phil here. This is going to be a fairly quick video. Why I know I always say that and end up being longer, but it's going to be a video on strategy formulation, strategy execution process. So how do we formulate our strategy, and then by what processes, I think I like plural better, do we actually execute said strategy or sub-strategies? So the strategy process is really as follows. The first one kind of obvious, right? Develop a strategic vision. Most likely that's going to be done at the very top of the firm. Um, Number two, set objectives. Number three, craft a strategy which will hopefully meet those objectives. Four, implement and execute the chosen strategy. Excuse me. And then five, evaluate and analyze the external environments and the firm's internal situation and performance. So a strategic vision describes where we are going, the course and direction management has charted, and the company's future product, customer, market, technology focus. So a strategic vision is top management's view of where we are going and the future, product, customer, market, technology focus. So, you know, yeah, it's kind of where we are now, and obviously that somewhat informs, where we're going to go. But this is, what I want you to take away here is this is very much like forward looking. Um, it should be distinctive and specific to the organization, kind of a no-brainer, and it avoids generic, innocuous, and uninspiring language. So my advice to firms with this is always the better. I've seen some that look like doctoral dissertations, and I've seen other ones that just look like a word salad. They're just, you read it and you're just really not sure what you're more confused when you read it than you were before. Should say something definitive about how the company's leaders intend to position the company beyond where it is today. An effectively communicated vision is a valuable management tool, certainly is, for enlisting the commitment of company personnel to engage in actions that move the company in the intended direction. Because ultimately, if the employees are not on board, obviously it's going nowhere. It crystallizes senior executives' own views about the firm's long term direction. It reduces the risk of rudderless decision making by management at all levels. What they mean by rudderless, if you're not familiar with that term, is there's basically no direction to it. It's a tool for winning the support of employees to help make the vision a reality. And again, you need that sort of lower level, kind of not just lower level, all the way through the organization buy-in. Otherwise, obviously, it's not going to work. It provides a beacon for lower level managers informing departmental missions. So they sort of look at, what's coming down, and then they can figure out, okay, like how do we make sure that what we're doing is accomplishing that? And it helps an organization prepare for the future. So a well-conceived mission statement conveys a company's purpose in language specific enough to give the company its own identity. So what we're not looking for here is ambiguity, is nebulosity. We're looking for concrete, succinct, actionable plans that are very clear. The clearer the better, and that makes sense to the people that are going to read it. So a company mission statement identifies the company's product or services, specifies the buyer needs that the company seeks to satisfy, and the customer groups or markets that it serves, and it gives the company its own identity. So hopefully when you read it, you sort of, you think of this firm differently. They're not just like every other firm. Even firms that, maybe sell the same kind of thing, there's something different about that firm. So, this is sort of a good primer, if you will, for this sort of the concept. I won't really talk about it much in this video, but the concept of differentiation. So a firm's strategic vision portrays its intended future business scope, for example, where are we going? And a firm's mission statement describes its present business and purpose, so who we are, what we do, and why we are here. So think about the strategic vision as looking forward, the mission statement, sort of more like what we're focusing on right now. The company's values are the beliefs, traits, and behavioral norms that its personnel are expected to display in conducting the company's business and pursuing its strategic vision and mission. So the managerial purpose in setting the objectives is really twofold. The first is to convert the strategic vision into specific strategic performance targets, and also well-stated objectives that are quantifiable. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, because I've always said and I've told PhD students this many, many times. It's like, how are you going to measure that? You can't just say this was, this experiment, this was successful, right? Like, how are you determining that? Um, so we can talk more about that later. And also contain a deadline for achievement. So measurable objectives are valuable because they focus organizational attention and align actions throughout the organization. Otherwise, it becomes very wasteful, very inefficient because no one's really sure what anybody else is doing. Um, and they just sort of, kind of blunder, kind of amble along, if you will. They serve as yardsticks for tracking a company's performance and progress. They motivate employees to expend greater effort and perform at a high level if it's the mission statement and what the firm is doing is something that they can kind of get behind, they can really believe in. It's always gonna, it's always gonna create better motivation. To promote outstanding performance, managers must set its performance targets high enough to stretch an organization to perform at its full potential. Of course, this idea of stretch objectives. Um, you know, uh, Sort of attainable, but not easily attainable. You don't want to make objectives that are impossible because people will just lose motivation. Why am I going to even try? Because I know I can never do that. But if you make them too easy, then that kind of breeds inefficiency. Um, so the goal is to have, if you think about that as a continuum, inefficiency versus just completely, unrealistic ridiculousness. We want to be somewhere in the middle. And this is the idea of the stretch objective. And a company exhibits strategic intent when it relentlessly pursues an ambitious strategic objective. So objectives are an organization's performance targets, the results management wants to achieve. Kind of goes without saying, right? Financial objectives relate to the financial performance targets management has established for the organization to achieve. So this is like how these are the ways that we're the objectives that we've set, that if we achieve these, then we've sort of achieved the overall mission, if you will. Strategic objectives relate to target outcomes that indicate a company is strengthening its market standing, competitive vitality, and also future business prospects. With respect to financial objectives, these should communicate management's targets for financial performance. And obviously, there's a lot of those, net income, ROI, EBITDA. You can look that up if you think I'm talking crazy. EBITDA, EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Very important metric on a multi-step income statement. Also relate to revenue growth, profitability, and ROI, return on investment. Just mentioned that. They're also lagging indicators because, in as much as they reflect results of past decisions, they're not really, financial statements are obviously historical, right? Like whatever you're seeing on a firm's financial statements are lagging indicators in as much as this is stuff that's already happened. The strategic objectives are related to a firm's market standing and its competitive vitality, the leading indicators of a firm's future financial performance and business prospects. If achieved, they indicate that a firm's future financial performance may be better than its current or past performance. Now let's look at short versus long-term objectives. So short-term objectives are targets to be achieved usually in the current period. It could be one or two periods thereafter. And they typically focus attention on delivery performance improvements. Long-term objectives, on the other hand, are going to force the organization to consider how actions currently underway will affect the company later. And they stand as a barrier to an undue focus on short-term results by nearsighted management. So hopefully, if this is done well, then the short-term objectives are going to tie very nicely into the long-term objectives. And another way to say that maybe, or think about that, conceptualize that would be if you achieve all these short-term objectives, you will by default also achieve the long-term objectives. Objectives need to be broken into performance targets for each of the organizations. So businesses, product lines, functional departments, and also individual work units. So sort of, starting at the top, the business overall, and sort of working its way down. So we want to craft a strategy to attract and please customers. Obviously, if we don't have a business to compete. I'd say compete effectively against rivals because we obviously want to outperform our rivals. Position the company in the marketplace and capitalize on attractive opportunities to grow the business. Respond to changing economic and market conditions, and of course, that's in this day and age, that's very important to do. Manage each functional piece of the business, with obviously different skill sets, and ultimately achieve the firm's performance targets. Now, in most firms, crafting strategy is a collaborative team effort that includes managers in various positions and at various organizational levels. So that could be all the way down from the supervisory level, all the way up through sort of lower level management, mid-level, senior management, all the way up to the very top. Yeah, and as it says, crafting strategy is rarely something only high-level executives do. I mean, they could, but if they do that, there tends to be a bit of a disconnect between, what they're planning, and then, with the best intentions and the best will in the world, it may just be that the people below them have not fully understood what they're trying to do. Hence, there might be a little sort of disparity there, if you will. All right, thanks for watching this somewhat quick video, and I will see you all in a future video.